Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today here at our Executive Book Club at the Stellenbosch Graduate Institute. And we do this. It's an amazing opportunity. We read for you and we introduce you sometimes to great authors like Victor Kgomoeswana that's with me here today. And literally hot off the press, we are talking about Africa Bounces Back. So Victor, I understand that this is the first time that you actually holding the book yourself.
Literally, yeah. Rian.
Wow. Okay, so it's hot off the press.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very special. And you are the first book club, you are the first book discussion I'm having about this.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate
we're so glad that you can join us here today. And in case you don't know, Victor is a writer, a speaker, a broadcaster. He is absolutely an expert on business in Africa, where he's worked a lot with multinational companies on different strategies, and he's been in various conferences, and he is your quintessential Afro optimist. He's the person that says, look very carefully at the way that you are approaching business in Africa, because if you think it's going to be the same as doing business in the rest of the world, you're kind of missing the opportunity. So I really appreciated that about your book. This book is coming out from Pan Macmillan, and I think it will be available nationally from next week onwards, and various bookstores and progressive book clubs such as ours. And we're very excited to have you here with us today. My name is Dr. Rian Stenberg, and I will be working with Victor today to maybe cover some topics, hear what he has to say, ask some questions, but also this is an opportunity for you as a participant also to ask questions. So there is a chat, and any questions on there we'll take into the discussion. So Victor, 434 pages later and 31 case studies later, I think we've traveled the whole of Africa. I must say, I started reading it and I was riveted. So tell us, how did we get here?
It's a journey, Rian. Thank you very much, and everybody. Good afternoon. And I'm always honored to talk about my writing, because believe it or not, I started out as a public speaker, not as a writer. I'm still coming to grips with the fact that I'm more of a writer now, and I'm hoping to grow and mature. So book clubs like yourselves, institutions that are reading the book and giving me a chance to speak, present me with that affirmation that every writer needs. The story goes back to 2002. And I've always been on radio, at least as far back as 1996. And in 2002, I started broadcasting about African business. At the time, I didn't know much about the rest of the continent. I was if I may say, typical South African who believed that there was South Africa and Africa. Yeah, I did not believe there was anything out, but I got to produce a daily news bulletin about African business. And the owner of the station then, it was Trans Africa Radio, the owner said, we want you to talk about everything else other than South Africa, which was very frustrating because that's all I knew. But luckily the internet was taking root, and I was able to go online and read a lot about countries, and I found that I was missing out on so much. So 2013, after working on many stations, TV, presenting and advising multinationals in two of the professional services firms, we call them audit firms sometimes, working with clients, I found myself now obliged to write a book, and that was Africa is Open for Business. In 2013, it came out in 2014, and it was 50 essays that are written. And by the way, the same with this one. Although it's 430 pages, you don't have to go page 1 to 400. You can go to any essay out of the 31 and read about it. So I have been blessed to travel to about 30 African countries doing business. And the more I see the problems that are there, and they are real, there's no denying that Africa has serious problems, the more I see opportunities as well. So I thought, well, the one thing that Africa has going for it since the beginning of time is the resilience that it has. So I thought in this time of COVID, in this time of recession and people getting frustrated, why don't I get the stories of resilience about the continent? And that's how the title Africa Bounces Back came about. So it's like saying, no matter what you do to Africa, it always bounces back.
Absolutely. And Victor, so I think the format is very accessible in that way. And I must say that from a writing perspective, I hope that you submit this for your doctorate soon to an applicable institution.
Hey,
because
let's talk to Stellenbosch. Let's talk to Stellenbosch University, man. I would love to come to Stellenbosch for
no
a
problem.
PhD. Yeah.
Because what strikes me, it's well researched, well referenced, well documented, and you cover a very wide range of topics, and I kind of, just as I was working through it, maybe picked up on a couple, and kind of like to just bounce it off you and just say, like, tell us a little bit about this or that or so, if you're comfortable with that, and then let's have a discussion around Africa bouncing back. So the first kind of idea that struck me was talking about trade versus aid. It seems like we kind of backpedaling on where we've been. There was kind of big debt relief, all of these types of things, and now, it's. I love the way that you were discussing kind of China, US, and even Russia, and the kind of the re-scramble for Africa, if we can call it that. So tell us a little bit about the way that you look at that.
That's it. I like your preface, Rian, about trade versus aid, because that's what we say Africa needs. And the beauty of trade versus aid is that with trade, everybody wins, including the investors. Now, COVID comes and disrupts the world economy as we know it. And it's almost like you were about to pay off your debt on your house, and then you lose your income. You can't do anything but go back to the bank and say, let's restructure the mortgage. And now you have given back the power to the financier. I don't hate financiers, but not all of them are genuine. So there's a chapter about COVID exactly for that purpose, that it has disrupted what was a very positive trajectory. Africa was about to take charge and control its own destiny. Now COVID has set it back. So countries that were already indebted, like Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and they were indebted, Rian, because they were building mega infrastructure projects, good projects, like the standard gauge rail in Kenya that connects Mombasa and Nairobi. The standard gauge rail in Ethiopia that connects Addis Ababa and Djibouti. Countries like Zambia that have built and upgraded the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport in Lusaka, which is a very critical point because you need a good airport in a place like that. All of them were indebted, to be honest, because of good projects, but they were over indebted. They were risking defaulting. And if you owe China so much money, they're going to take some of your assets. So it's that kind of thing that whereas we have come off the IMFs and the World Banks, now China has got Africa on lockdown with regard to debt that we may now be going back 25 years.
And so I mean, in that kind of backdrop, and I really appreciate that you did a brilliant analysis of tourism in COVID and the impact of it. I think that's a $4.1 trillion industry that we've locked down, and I think if I remember the numbers correctly, you say that we won't even hit $1 trillion now post lockdown on that. So that, I mean, from a net income perspective for Africa creates a scenario where I get the sense what you're advocating is that we need to look internally, that we need to start asking ourselves, how are we taking care of ourselves as Africa? Is that a fair?
Right. It is a fair thing, and it's the right time to ask it, Rian, because we've just signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And although it says trade area, that trade has a lot of tourism. Tourism is a large chunk of trade. Because think about it, if I travel to Cape Town or Stellenbosch right now on business, I'm likely to stay there 2 days, 3 days, and I'll ask my partner to join me for the weekend, which means a conference tourism has become leisure tourism. So Africa has been benefiting a great deal from that. Countries like Rwanda that have built a very world-class conference center in the Kigali International Convention Center, around it 2 or 3 5-star hotels, suddenly is not able to attract as much conference tourism. And when people travel to a country like Rwanda, they end up seeing the gorillas, which is a major spinner of revenue for the country. So we now have to think, okay, if the UK is going to put us on a red list, if China is going to put us on a red list, what is the best way to get tourism back on? Is for me to travel to Stellenbosch, for you to travel to Eastern Cape, because internal tourism will be subject to less restrictions. But here's the kicker: domestic travelers spend a lot more money than international travelers, which is a very strange thing. But the reason is, instead of flying from the Western Cape to the Eastern Cape, you can drive. And when you're driving, you take more time on the road. You're likely to buy more curios. You're likely to stop more at restaurants. You're likely to fill up at filling stations. And that's why you end up spending more money. The international tourists might be having more dollars to spend, but you, Rian, will be driving a lot longer, and you're likely to come back. And so the interesting thing is that we are not going to rescue tourism by attracting international tourists. We are going to have to popularize local domestic tourism, and provinces like yours, which are very beautiful tourist attractions, are going to have to radically shift the way they price their establishments. So they can't be pricing for people with dollars. They should price for people with rent.
That's what I really loved about your book, is that you say that we should look at some of the key opportunities, including nationalism, which I found a very interesting idea, to say that, and I think Lulu King in the chat is also making that point, to say self-preservation is the incentive. So maybe we need to have a better national agenda and a pride, and also an internal marketing within the continent. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, nationalism can be a plus and real poison, because if you are nationalist in the sense that you recognize that you have enough buying power locally, then it's a good thing. So when we made the movie, I'll use the example of the movie Long Walk to Freedom. When we made the movie, we made it for Hollywood. Big mistake. Because although Idris Elba is a great actor, and I'm sure he made the movie famous in the US, I don't think even 100 million people saw it on the African continent. Now, Africa has more than 1 billion people. Therefore, if we made Long Walk to Freedom with an actor that can speak isiXhosa and make it in isiXhosa and make it with subtitles and sell it to the rest of the continent first, we could have sold for 10 Rand 400 million tickets. But we wouldn't be showing it in lush Ster-Kinekor and new metro circuit. We would have been showing it in school halls. We would have been showing it in university auditorium venues. We would have been showing it on the back of a truck in a village. But 10 Rand per ticket could have made that movie a blockbuster before it leaves the shores of Africa. And that way it would have been America, the UK, come and get the real story of Africa told by Africans. But because we were so obsessed with selling it to Hollywood, I don't think even 20 million people saw it in South Africa itself.
Absolutely. But I'm sure we also Black Panther, because it was about Africa. So Hollywood did us a little bit better there.
No, for sure. But let me correct you. Remember, I'm not anti-Hollywood. I'm saying when we make the movies, let's make it for locals first, and the international community will come looking for it. So when we say nationalism, I mean it in that sense. When we dig gold in our mines, we should be making it to create gold coins locally and sell them to Africans, so that every one of the billion Africans could have a gold coin. That creates a London, a Bank of England on the African continent. That way we can control the price of gold better than rely on the Bank of England and the Americans, who own more gold, by the way, than anybody in the world, and the Russians. Because if they decide we are selling gold, they're selling it down without having any risk. Now our mines become less valuable, because if the gold price shoots down, then the value of the mines become a problem. The indebtedness of the mines, without doing anything wrong in the operational side, become a problem. So we now find ourselves, the solvency becomes an issue.
Yeah, and I thought that was quite an interesting analysis that you did in the book around how the Bank of England used the reserves that they held for Africans kind of as a security into the rest of their lending into the rest of the world. And it begs the question, why aren't we setting the standards and the rules by which we operate as a continent? And I thought that that was quite interesting
Yeah.
because, and I think one of the examples that you or ideas that you propose is that we build our own kind of Facebook,
Yes.
Apple, Amazon, all of those types of services, and ask ourselves, are we not kind of creating the same set of barriers, but now in a digitized age where we're moving all of our information off the continent and all of our information
Yes.
processing off the continent?
For sure. Think
Yeah,
about it this way. Sorry to interrupt you there.
no
On
worries.
the Facebook YouTube story. Right now we have a young man here called KG, Master KG. He's a DJ who is only second to, I think, Burna Boy, the Nigerian artist, with regard to streaming on Spotify. On YouTube, he has more views than anybody. The problem is, for all the millions and hundreds of millions of downloads, he is not making a lot of money. YouTube, rather, is making the money. Spotify is making the money. Again, bless Spotify, because it enabled the world to get to know who Master KG is. So I'm grateful for it. But I'm saying, hang on a second. Why should we be having YouTube in Palo Alto and all the Silicon Valley companies owning the rights to our content? Hey,
Yeah.
let's take it even a step upstream. Why should EMC Squared, which is owned by Dell Computers now, be owning our data in the Atlantic when that data is coming from Africa? In fact, if you look at what Netflix is doing, it is showing you that the African story is a lot more interesting. So, okay, Netflix, go your way, you do your own to American standards. But let's get another Netflix making African story movies, whatever, to African standards. That way we create a bigger community, we create a bigger ecosystem in this digital economy that we're talking about.
No, absolutely, and I really appreciated the way that you, in the book, kind of weave through that and pose the idea that the backlog is the dividend, um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that these things, digitization, nationalism, looking at the environment, governance, decentralization, deregulation, all of those ideas need to come into us capitalizing on this backlog. So I thought that that was a very powerful way to think about it, to say, you know, we can't solve the problems that we've got utilizing the rules of others, which we will then have to pay for those solutions.
Right. Right. There you have it, exactly. So we now have to, I mean, you remember you're from the Western Cape, or you're based in the Western Cape. We have Rooibos. Rooibos is as African as you can get. But you remember we had a very daring Texan woman in the US, Dallas, who tried to say, actually, Rooibos is an American patent.
Wow.
The chic. We can't call sparkling wine champagne now because the French won't let us. We can't call port because the Portuguese won't let us do that. But here's an American who across the Atlantic wanted to claim what we have in the Clan William area, our own fine boss, and say, no, that's an American brand. But it's because we don't have a system that makes sure we protect our own intellectual property. Now, is it the fault of the Americans? No, it's our own fault. And that's the backlog I'm talking about. So we have younger people now who understand the digital economy better, who understand the economy, mobile economy better, who are trained in these skills, who understand fintech. We have people who can build hardware, who can build storage and service facilities and make sure we own everything. That backlog now should encourage us to make sure that we build on. Just look at where the movies are. Whether it's Thuso Mbedu, who's now famous in the US, it means we have actors, we have the stories. Then let's take it all and own the economy now.
Absolutely. I also love the kind of weave that you do through the different products or like major sectors of the economy. I think in education you had quite a lot, which obviously for me, I'm very passionate about education in Africa because I run education in Africa.
Yes.
But just looking at that, that's a major industry that you have a long talk about, an essay about tourism, but also what I well, and some of the other areas in terms of trade and China and all sorts of different things that you do talk about. But what really struck me is that you also spend quite a lot of time talking about leadership and
Yes.
how we should lead better in Africa, and given us some very nice cases of people that have done it well, possibly sometimes against the odds. And the one that I picked up on was President John Pombe Magufuli from Tanzania, fondly known as Bulldozer,
Yes.
and how he built infrastructure. Tell us a little bit more about what you would put out as a vision for infrastructure in the continent.
Because we are talking about intra-Africa trade, and for all we like about flying, you are really going to appreciate the continent when you're driving or on a rail. You know, a journey by train is still going to be a much more exciting way to travel the continent than flying. And so infrastructure from railroad, which is almost the spine of everything, then the roads that run along some of those or lead from the smaller towns into the rail access, and then the ports and harbors so that we can move trade in and out, the border posts so that we don't spend too much time stopping at the border post, rather we travel smoothly. And then we also have infrastructure like energy, so that we don't have power outages unnecessarily when we have sun, we have geothermal, we have solar, we have hydro, and then the infrastructure for the ICT so that we can also communicate. So when I'm pointing out the infrastructure, of course, the houses, that people are going to be able to live in houses where there are mines, where they are. If you build a road across the desert, you have created a property corridor. Now, back to that point also about universities. I mention universities because, you know, Stellenbosch is one good example, that when you're driving around the Stellenbosch University, you might as well be in its own city. It's its own city. In fact, if you look at the American universities, every state, every city that's famous was built either around a university or something. So a university can be built in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly the infrastructure recovers on the back of it. If people want to see a good example, they must go to Kimberley and look at that university there, which before it was built, Kimberley was becoming a ghost town. After they built the university there, even De Beers has started returning some of the functions to their Kimberley headquarters or sub headquarters. So by just building a university in the middle of nowhere, and that point I reference Professor Chilidzi Rachitanga, who wrote a book called New Cities, New Economies. I reference him because he emphasizes that one of the ways South Africa can close and do away with the apartheid spatial planning is to start universities where the majority of people live.
Excellent. You also give some quite a bit of consideration to the kind of call it the illegal economy of Africa, piracy, illicit flows, etc. Yeah. So and I would love to kind of just get your view on the idea that, you know, any developing kind of world probably has an element of that. And what's your thoughts?
Yeah, originally I'm a science teacher, you know, so I was a high school science teacher and biology teacher. And one thing that natural sciences teach you, whether it's osmoregulation of a cell, whether it's the ecosystem in biology, whether it's entropy versus enthalpy in chemistry, in physics, is that nature does not like to concentrate resources. So if you're going to blow up a balloon and keep the air compressed in a balloon, you need a lot more energy to, first of all, inflate the balloon and keep it inflated than if you just punctured it and let the air flow and go where it's needed. Resources tend to do the same thing economically. So when you talk of Somali piracy, you have Somali people who are subsistence fishermen. So when you are in Somalia and you are in the Western Cape, again, you know, the fishermen of the Western Cape, it's no longer just looking for food to feed their families. It's a way of being a man. Are you a man enough? Can you fish? If you are in KwaZulu-Natal, are you man enough? Can you grow sugar cane? It's not just about the economic benefits. It's also about your essence as a human being. So Somali people, one of the things they do very well and with pride is fishing. And suddenly China comes up with these big boats where they can take all the catch out of the Somali waters. And by doing that, they leave the Somali fishermen with not only an inability to feed their families, but almost feeling like they're not men enough. It's like somebody else walked into your territorial waters and took away the fish. So when we talk about Somali piracy, we forget that it's essentially and quintessentially the story of somebody who came in with big ship technology, stole all the fish from the sea, and left the Somalis with no opportunity. Now, am I glorifying piracy? No, I'm not. But I'm saying the business of piracy is more important than us labeling the pirates as being problematic.
Yeah, and that's an interesting reflection to say, and I think it highlights the dichotomy that we're in, which is to say that we're playing by a globalized set of rules while we need to do a local development, which is often against those very rules. I'm not saying that we have to be unethical about it, but I mean, we know that a lot of the world powers got where they were by being pirates and being slave owners and being all of these things, and we can't do that. So we have to find a very different way to develop and also create our markets differently, while at the same time, I think that the interesting thing is, and I'm also quite passionate about it, the kind of idea of made in Africa, where the issue is that if we don't recognize that we need to pay the local premium, then we constantly look towards Chinese goods and other types of things, which is slightly cheaper, but actually for us to consume it is far more expensive because we're paying for it. Yeah, because we're paying for it with resources that we've taken out of our own ground.
And that's where I like your proposition that we don't need to become pirates to counter piracy, but we can ask the governments of Somalia and the governments of China about the deals they are signing and say to them, why do you sign fishing deals to give Chinese ships the right to take out everything without creating a win-win dispensation? Why do you keep on allowing China to build railroads that are taking minerals raw as they are as commodities into China to manufacture gadgets that they then sell back to us without insisting that for every mining right that we grant you, you have to show us that you are giving us a share of the downstream economy. So beneficiate more locally, and you can still own the copyright of the electronic equipment, but manufacture some of them in the area where you're mining. And that's where I wrote the chapter about the cocoa industry, which is Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, accounting for more than 60% of the cocoa production in the world. And when they said we are going to hold back the production because first we want to give our farmers a better price, and secondly, we want to get more beneficiation to manufacture the end product, which is chocolate, in the local economies than just take the raw commodity and send it abroad where Switzerland can own the copyright and they can sell us chocolate more expensive.
Absolutely. And I thought at the time when I saw that is one of the bravest things that I've seen in a long, long time. So Victor, tell us, in a perfect world, what's the Africa that you see? How's this Africa? What's the things that we need to be doing? We've got executives on this call.
Yes.
They're going to go out, they're going to buy the book, and they're going to learn a lot about some of the opportunities. What's your end game? What do you think we need to take from this?
Yeah, the Africa that I see, I'm going to start on a philosophical, spiritual level.
Yeah, cool.
Is one where everybody, whether it's Rian Steinberg or or Johan Kukemur or Vusumzi Sitole, all these people understand that which Kwame Nkrumah tried to teach us. Kwame said, I'm not an African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. What am I saying? The Africa I envision and I'm really willing to work hard for is one where everybody on this continent, irrespective of whether they are of Asian descent or European descent or American, remember that once you have discovered the Africa in you, you understand this is the cradle of humankind. You decide to do that which is best for this continent. What am I saying? If your great-great-grandchildren were to be able to watch a movie on how you made a living, they would be proud of you. So that is on the philosophical level. On the practical level is one where we understand that we are so rich, we are way too rich to be poor. And all we need to do is use all the backlogs that we have, irrespective of what caused the backlogs, the lack of infrastructure. Let's start thinking of them as opportunity to invest. But when we do get investment, one, we crowd finance it. The Ethiopians proved it when they built the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The World Bank was saying, we're not going to pay you because you are violating the rights of Sudan and Egypt. They said, well, those rights you are talking about were coined without consulting us. So we're going to use the River Nile to serve the Ethiopians first, and we will release the water. Then they went into villages and got every Ethiopian to give $5, $30, $20, and they were able to raise the 6 billion that they now use to build the dam. So in South Africa, we have stokvels that are not being used to crowd finance. And as much as I want foreign investment, I want those stokvels and the burial societies and the savings clubs to be used more to show that we can finance our own thing. Thirdly, we have to make sure that when we attract the investment, we cut deals for ourselves that give us the share of the downstream economy. No exporting raw commodity, because I can tell you, and I'm sure I give you the history in the book of how the UK became the knitwear capital of the world. The Buckingham Palace people didn't play. They banned the export of raw wool. They banned it and even made it mandatory for any adult over the age of, any person over the age of 6 who was not royalty, to wear a hat which is woven or knitted with wool that is synthesized and produced in the UK. So there's no, South Korea did the same thing. There's no country that got rich by exporting commodities. Now, for us to be given the impression that Africa can do that, and we are doing it with the help of some of the leaders in on this call, who are happy to say we are running mines, we are running commodity trading companies, but all we are doing is we're milking Africa of its commodities and we are shipping that abroad. We're not hiding the fact that we are happy to be export commodities. And then lastly, of course, taking care of our youth dividend. We have so many young people, and if we don't educate them correctly, if we don't give them good health, so we lower the mortality rate and we make them educated for employability. I know we are talking about entrepreneurship, but not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Young people out there need companies that are thriving to get jobs. They will mature into entrepreneurs, but we can't be forcing them all to be entrepreneurs by just scaling down on our employment in the name of COVID, in the name of globalization, because we are shooting ourselves in the foot by doing that. We don't need as much money as most of the leaders on this call are thinking they need to survive, to thrive, lastly, to be sustainable.
Absolutely. And I think that maybe to add into that, I think the notion that we need somebody to come fund our progress while we have needs. I always find it so interesting because we've got this kind of massive need for jobs and we've got all of these massive problems. Okay. So shouldn't we be looking at it in a very different way to sit and say, let's start employing the people to solve the problems that we've got? And I think that the interesting thing is that, and maybe this would be a controversial statement, is that we've kind of we haven't embraced the mindset that nobody else is going to come and tell us to solve this problem. So that's what I really like about the book, is that it actually tells us, look, we should solve our own problems. Okay,
We should.
we shouldn't be worrying about foreign funding and all of these other types of things, because in fact that's just a clever way to snooker us out of our money. Okay, so
let's any man, Rian, any man or woman who is happy to have the guy next door coming into their house to solve their problems is setting themselves up for failure, exploitation, and almost a chance to lose everything they have. So nobody should jump into your house. They should come in on your terms to help you. There's no arrogance, no refusal to acknowledge we might need external help, but it must come in on our terms.
Yeah. Maybe a quick question: if you could choose 3 skills to teach every African, what would that be?
Self-love. Self-love is one of them, because you can't love anybody else or be loved by anybody if you don't love yourself. You teach people to love you, to treat you by showing self-love. I didn't dress up like this because I think a suit is but I just know that if I project an image of somebody who's neat, who's clean, who takes care of themselves, I just already am saying to you, take me seriously. So self-love is one skill that I believe Africans should need. The second one would be to exploit what we have. First of all, protect and exploit what we have, because we have so much, it's scary. We have so much, it's scary. And then the last one, I would say, would be to think about posterity, to think about legacy, rather than just running to drive the biggest car, to live in the biggest house. You know, the size of a bed is this small, the space that I occupy. Even if you are the plumpest and the most overweight person, you still don't take more than 1 meter wide. The space you need is that small. The table you can sit at is so small. The car you need. So most of the things we are chasing deprive us of an opportunity to think about what we are leaving behind for our great grandchildren.
Awesome. And I think that that's so important, because I think a lot of people have thought about the short term, and I think with all the kind of scandals that we're seeing floating around, which you also do comment on in the book, a lot of that is just short-termism and somebody just wanting to put a large amount of dollars under their bed for some strange reason, which seems to be a deep fascination in Africa. How much dollars can you put under your bed at the cost of your brother and posterity? So I really like that. You talk a lot about, please feel free in the chat if you've got any questions or comments. You talk a lot about urbanization, creating a middle class, so climate change being a big threat, etc. Tell us a little bit about those ideas. What do you think? The fact that people are going to cities, and it's really changing the composition of Africa. And I think myself, I've traveled to probably about 20 African countries. And you've got this massive kind of sprawl, willingness to live in substandard conditions, large cities that aren't really shaping an infrastructure, etc. So how do we look at urbanization differently, possibly in an African context?
Yeah, especially because we have now ICT and the ability to transmit. I grew up in a rural area. I live in Johannesburg for the past I came here in 1993, so I've been here for quite a long time. We can improve the quality of living in the rural areas, first of all, by building roads, by making sure we build proper schools, by creating opportunities for people to earn a living, including making agriculture attractive again. That's a way of dealing with urbanization, because you reduce the pressure on cities already by saying to people, you don't need to leave the outlying areas, because you can be a farmer here and produce whatever you produce and sell, or process even and sell. So that's the one thing. The source of urbanization in South Africa, I will use South Africa, was mining, looking for slave labor, if I'm to put it bluntly. That's how Johannesburg was born. The land tax was created, and the only way people could pay that land tax was to earn money in Johannesburg. That way, the gold miners and whatever got free labor, and they then created the Sowetos, thinking they are keeping things under control. and yet they didn't realize they couldn't sustain that. So if you develop an opportunity in an urban area, let it be on a win-win basis. And our cities should not develop the way they have developed. The myth of an upmarket suburb is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And I go to Paris and I look at those Paris on the most expensive streets of Paris, and I see that in the attics there are places where the workers live. So the most expensive part of Paris has got in the same building accommodation for workers. But in South Africa, somehow we believe if we get workers into our houses, into the neighboring and build them, we are devaluing. I still have to meet a property real estate person to explain to me how having a worker living next door to you will devalue your property, especially Rian, because we spend no time in those houses, and the only people who live in them are the very people we're trying to keep out. So they spend more than 40% of their income on transport. They can't look after their children, which means we break their families, and yet we are not having safety. We still have to buy dogs, guns, build high fences, build in cameras, and we are not. So to me, urbanization must be a win-win ecological approach, that when we build a city, let's make sure, look at how many estates, golf estates have been built, but there's no schooling for the workers' children. There's no clinic. So if your worker now falls ill because they don't have medical aid, they can't afford the private hospital next door to you, they have to travel sometimes 50 kilometers to the nearest clinic. They're going to lose out on a day's pay, and you're going to lose out on somebody to look out here. So I'm saying let's have mixed use, mixed residences, so that we can have the workers and the people working together. Otherwise, having workers in the buildings is what we use. The security guys, we don't know where they live. So if they steal from us in an inside job, we don't even know where to trace them. And that way, so we are ridiculous, because the way we think we are protecting ourselves is the way we expose ourselves the most to danger, and it just becomes unsustainable.
Yeah, and then I guess you get the model where the elite lives in kind of protected areas, which we see all over Africa. Every town has a place where the elite kind of crops themselves up, and everybody else needs to live in a different. What I also like about the book is you've got a lot of examples of really good projects. There's one section like Lekki Deep Sea Port, Abuja Kaduna Railway, this Suez Canal, the auto route in Algeria, etc. And it's very interesting to see that there's actually like really good projects that are happening, and I don't think we're aware of how to invest in these, how to get involved, etc. Because it does seem that it's kind of governments having conversations with, as you said, China, America, France, some other world powers, and somehow we not as the locals investing, and at the same time we're getting poorer and poorer because we're being stripped of our money by these very same projects in a very different way, because we end up paying or not paying the taxes for that. So how do we create more visibility in Africa of ways to invest and opportunities do that? And I think there's a question in the chat as well around what role does the political leadership play in this kind of bounce back that you're proposing?
Political leadership must take the direction from us. There's no politician who's going to make you a priority. The politicians must learn from us. Is it Plato who said, if you think you're too smart to get involved in politics, then get ready to be ruled by somebody who's less intelligent than you are? So we are too smart to get involved in politics, then let's suck it up. When the politicians do what they do, let's take it in, because we are allowing them to do that. But how do we make sure we make these projects visible? It's simple. In my language, not Sotho, they say, what that means is, if a boy never leaves his neighborhood, he's going to have to marry his sister. And like so if you are an investor and you are not happy to leave Camps Bay, you're going to have to end up just investing in your own goldfish tank, because the real opportunities are in Lagos. But if you think of Lagos as a place where you have only drug dealers and 419 scammers, you are missing out. So the way to do it, one, is to do what I'm doing on a larger scale.
Okay.
In other words, have more young South Africans talking about this. Secondly, you can ask my children. I took them on holiday into places like Uganda, Rwanda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, because I said to them, it's easier to travel to Switzerland, but it's as good as you are in Sandton. But if you travel to Livingston, you really understand your history and you are able to see what possibilities are there. But you also know that your accent from Sandton is not always going to get you around the continent, because there are parts of Africa where you'll speak with the Cape Town accent, English, polished Model C school or privates, and people won't hear what you're saying, and they'll speak English back to you. You won't hear what they're saying, or they'll speak French or Portuguese or Lingala. So by getting more South Africans to travel, Rian, we are going to just open the doors. Traveling makes you see how small you are. So when you travel into these areas, you realize how small-minded you are in thinking that there are no opportunities. The reason our banks and investment houses are not doing enough to go out and invest in Lagos, in Nairobi, is because they are using credit committees that are only made of people who live in suburbs. Yeah. So you want to evaluate a project coming from Lagos, and you have 2 people from Cape Town, you have 3 people from Johannesburg, 5 from Durban. Hey, those people aren't going to be able to assess the risk. Remember, what is the meaning of risk? Risk means the possibilities that what you want will not materialize or what you're afraid of will materialize. So how can you evaluate the risk profile of a project in a country you don't know? You can't. What are you going to do? You're going to do what's convenient. You're going to shut it down, or you are going to just make a very bad decision. So traveling is going to make us a lot more. I promise you, you travel on the continent, you won't get malaria. I've traveled this continent, 30 countries. I still don't know what malaria tablets look like.
Cool. I did get it once, and I don't recommend it just in case. Yeah, that's also.
Okay. But you're safe now.
Yeah, that's fine. No stress. Now, I think you make a very good point to sit and say, let's travel, let's create more spaces, and I also think let's do more of this. Let's tell the story, and also let's read these stories and take inspiration from them. I think that's it's such a powerful thing to see such a. I mean, it's 430 pages worth of the goodness of Africa. I mean, that's the amazing part.
But I have to emphasize, it's a buffet. It's a buffet. When you say 400 pages and people see that, they tell me, oh my goodness. No. You can start on any page, any chapter that you want. And by the way, I have to emphasize, Tebe Kalafeng, a top brand strategist of Africa, who has been to all countries. I've been to 30 countries. He's been to all 55 of them. He has been running a survey of top African brands and brands that are international but top in Africa. And he wrote a special insert, a special chapter for the book. So people can now get an idea of what brands are popular on the continent, including those that are not African and those that are African. Sorry, I just needed to put that in, that you don't have to read page 1 to 400. You can read 1 chapter a week or a day, you'll be fine, starting anyway in the book.
That's on page 427 onwards. Just I read that section very deeply, because what I find is that we don't really connect with African brands. So top African brands in real terms ends up being things like Coca-Cola and other types of brands. It's almost like those people understand us better than we do ourselves, because they make more money out of us than we do ourselves. I think it's a very powerful point that you make in that chapter. Okay, so Victor, you've kind of given us a tour of where you've been over the last couple of years, and I think there's an amazing book. There's some really, really interesting stuff in there. Some of the fastest growing markets you profile, like lots of companies, lots of ideas, lots of projects, etc., etc. So definitely, I would say that if you have any interest in Africa, this is the book to read, and to get out there. Maybe a kind of parting shot from my side is to ask you where to from here, Victor.
I liked how you opened. You must be Prophet Rian, man, because my plan in the short term to Medium is to get into academia. I'm a teacher originally by training, and I know that the real power of learning comes from teaching others. I've done this for the past 19 years now, and I've spoken to clients. I continue. I'm available to speak at different company meetings, strategies about this, but I really want to get into academia, make this a more formal university study, African studies, and get more young people on a postgrad level to go out there so we can produce books like this a lot more. And because young people are more tech savvy, they will do it in a lot more exciting manner. They won't write a book. They will have QR codes. They will have videos. They will Instagram, but they will be guided by someone like me who knows a bit about the continent and is able to focus them. So that's the future. You are likely to see me in academia more, and starting with that which you proposed, making this a formal submission to a university that's keen, and then taking it from there, creating a chair at that university that will bring in people from all sorts of companies to get their strategy thinking right, to make them understand stakeholder relations better. So stakeholder relations management, to have them master the ways of doing business in Africa, make sure that they learn from case studies, what not to do, what to do, profile these success stories. That way everybody wins, because then you don't need a Victor to talk to you at all events. You will have 200 young people in the next 2-3 years who have been put through the right mill and who understand, who have traveled, but are able to tell the story in a much more savvy, tech-savvy manner, and are more appealing to get the message out there.
Absolutely. I think it's such a stunning idea. And definitely, I think that we are indeed, one of the colleagues says in the chat, we're too rich to be poor. We wish you great luck in both selling this book, and hopefully I'm so excited that you saw it for the first time today. I know the feeling of actually seeing your own book. That's just like,
exactly.
Wow,
Exactly.
like all of those long nights and all of that thinking
you have
and
no
all
idea.
of that writing. I do.
Writing under COVID, not sure if you're gonna live to see the end of the chapter or live to see the end of the book. The anxiety was just poisonous.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you've been able to get the message out there, and I think it's a good time. And I thank our colleagues for joining us here today. All the people that tagged into this chat as well, and also for joining us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Pan Macmillan, it will be in bookstores nationally available from next week onwards. I think it's about 330 rand, and it's 430 pages, so it's less than a page, around a page.
Thank you for that computation, Rian. You're the man.
And we truly wish you good luck with taking this to market, because I think it's such an important message. And I'm definitely going to get me a copy of it, and I'm also going to make sure that this is the type of stuff that you really do want to see in the classroom, where often we have to learn about strategies that isn't relevant. Well, yeah, we've got cases, we've got different things, and can ask, okay, so how can we do more of this? How can we get that done and put out there? And how can we really take this continent back? Because I think that's the ultimate message that you said, like, we can bounce back. But it's going to require some bouncing.
Yeah. Thank you, Rian and Stellenbosch, for inviting me, and everybody for tuning in. I'm really humbled by this, and it's a special moment, because this is the first time I'm talking about the book to any book club, in fact, to anybody, except the media interview I did on Africa Day, but then I didn't have the book. But thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, to everybody, the recording will be available afterwards. Please go out and get the book for yourself, and also share the story. And Victor, I'm sure when the next one comes out, and soon, we're definitely going to have a conversation. I see there's some people that are saying they will be definitely getting the book. Thanks, Norma, and thanks, Kingdom, as well. Cool, and well done to you, Victor.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And with that, I think we'll sign off. Thanks so much.